Hey, Commissioner, you may now begin.
Good afternoon. I'm Roy Priest, the Chair of the Housing Opportunity Commission, and I'd like to welcome you to our April the 6th, 2022 meeting of the Commission. I'd like to start by introducing the members of the Commission who are present. Fran Kelleher, Vice Chair. Rick Nelson, Chair Pro Tem. Pamela Bird, Commissioner. Linda Kroom, Commissioner. Jeffrey Merkowitz, Commissioner, and Jackie Simon, Commissioner. Today, we will start our meeting with first adopting the agenda for the meeting. Are there any modifications to the agenda before we start? Seeing none, we will proceed with the meeting, starting with the information exchange portion of our agenda. We have been notified that no one has signed up for the community forum part of this meeting, so that we will go to the next item, which is a report of the acting executive director. Fortunately, I say fortunately because Kaylene Brown, our acting executive director, is on vacation, well-deserved vacation, is taking some time off. And so I don't know that anyone's going to report on her. I know, Tim, were you prepared to say something on behalf for this portion of the agenda?
Yes, I am, Commissioner Priest.
Okay, so I'll go to Tim Getzinger.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Priest. Good afternoon, commissioners, staff, and the millions and millions in the viewing public with us today. This is the Executive Director's Report for April 6, 2022. I'm filling in, as the Commissioner said, for Kaylene Brown, the Acting Executive Director. My name is Tim Getzinger. I am the Chief Development Funds Officer, as well as the Acting CFO. I'm going to start off talking about some of the different services that we provided last month. I'm not going to go verbatim through the Executive Director's Report. I think you've all seen it, but I just want to highlight a few of the neat things that we've done. First of all, virtual home ownership workshop on Saturday, March 12th. That's right, staff works on Saturday. On Saturday, March 12th, 2022. The HOC Homeownership Program hosted a virtual homeownership workshop for HOC residents and employees. It was very well attended. There were 11 employees, as well as 40 residents representing 51 families who participated in the workshop. Upon completion of the workshop, each participant received a certificate of achievement, which can be used to satisfy the home buyer's education course requirement for the MPP, as well as the MPDU program. I'm going to keep talking about some of the services that we did in March. And again, we provided a bunch. The service coordination unit provides assessment, counseling, information, referrals, and program services to HOC customers. In March 2022, the highlights for activities of the resident counselors include the following. We assisted with the relocation of families impacted by the explosion and fire at Friendly Gardens to the nearby Paddington Square apartments, which HOC owns. Additionally, we participated in a community cool-down meeting to address the recent issues in the Cider Mill community. We met with staff from the Street Outreach Network formed by the county's Department of Health and Human Services to finalize an MOU for the Street Outreach Network to provide services to customers at Cider Mill. We also facilitated the fundamentals of housing workshops on March 16th and the 17th. We facilitated resource sharing workshops on the 22nd and 24th. It's a lot. It's impressive. We facilitated a resident meeting at Seneca Ridge. We facilitated a senior fitness exercise program at Forest Oak Towers. We also did a senior brown bag food distribution at Elizabeth House. Partnered with St. John's Church of Bethesda to facilitate the Nourishing Bethesda Nutritional Education and Food Distribution event at Waverly House. It keeps going and going. I'll just note one more. We assisted with customers with relocation and other needs for RAD and renovation projects at the Rockville Town Center, to the residences on the Lane, Stewart Town Homes, Shady Grove Apartments, Willow Manor Apartments, Bower Park Apartments, and Georgian Court Apartments. Now, let me talk a little bit about the Resident Services Unit, and we're going to talk about the Fatherhood Initiative. As you well know, it is a national program funded by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. HOC is the first and only housing agency to be awarded a grant under the Fatherhood Initiative. We completed our first 5-year grant as a best practice model, and we are awarded a second 5-year grant, and we are in the second year of that second grant. And of course, it provides parenting education, case management services, financial assistance for educational classes and training, and participation incentives. So in March, 30 new fathers were enrolled and 21 graduated. I want to note that I think we've seen an increased enrollment in a lot of these virtual programs for the simple reason is that these are virtual events. People, they don't need to commute. It's not easy to get to point A to point B in Montgomery County with all the traffic. And I think that this is something that we should keep in mind as we're approaching the transition back into the office. I know that one thing that we always like to report on is the Housing Resources Unit in terms of the HCV and emergency housing voucher utilization. As you know, HOC selects applicants from the housing path wait list to achieve a 95% program utilization rate. The program baseline is just under 7,700 vouchers. It's actually 7,659. The current utilization rate is 93%. I'm sure there's some decimals that bring that up a little bit more. HOC housed 87 new applicants during the month of February, and 93 contracts are pending execution. Currently, 158 families with issued vouchers are searching for suitable units to rent, and 150 families were selected from the wait list last month. Just so you know, the report also further identifies information on our emergency housing vouchers, which we have 118 total. 41 families have successfully leased units. 76 families with issued vouchers are searching for suitable units to rent. Now I just want to touch on a little bit of real estate. One of the neat stories out there is the retail spaces located within HOC's 124 unit mixed income, mixed use Fenton Silver Spring development. It continues to take shape with news that the Breakfast Club, which is described as an all-day breakfast restaurant featuring Southern American with a twist of Caribbean cuisine. And that restaurant is targeting a May opening. And it's pretty cool because it's a local chef that's opening this restaurant. He's got he will have 3 restaurants in the area, and Chef Mizurkuri, which I'm sorry, I just butchered his name. But I want to point out that he opened the Angry Jerk restaurant last summer on Georgian Avenue. I just want to mention it because it's a creative name. And then this news follows the upcoming opening of the Rockville-based coffee shop and roaster Black Lion Cafe, which is also targeting a spring opening at the property. So a lot of good things happening. Finally, the Housing Production Fund. I'm not sure if you saw the article published in the American Prospect, but it's gaining traction as a nationwide model. A lot of jurisdictions are taking a look at it. Legislation is being introduced. California, Seattle, Rhode Island, Nashville, Denver, St. Petersburg, DC, and New York City all are interested in the Housing Production Fund. And we met with the County Council last night regarding the county's CIP budget. We received a favorable feedback and approval. And I want to mention that we will go back for the operating budget on April 25th, where we will discuss the operating budget, but more importantly, the HPF. There does seem to be, some traction being gained. So fingers crossed, potentially we can get some more resources. And with that, I will throw it back to you, commissioners. Are there any questions?
I would just like to comment that the council, I was at the council meeting yesterday when the staff made their presentation, and the agency was very well received, and the staff presentation was excellent as always. And it was a very welcoming and supportive environment for the agency, and the staff represents us well. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have one question, Chairman. And if you don't have an answer, you can always provide it later. But you were talking in the housing choice voucher program, for example, that we always have a number of households who have vouchers issued, not what have had ability to go out and search for units. And I was just wondering, what has been the sort of outcome of that? Have seekers been able to find units in the normal time frame prior to the COVID as opposed to now? Or has there been any noticeable difference between capacity to actually find a unit when they are seeking it? The 157 seekers is quite a few out there, and kind of wonder, is there enough supply out there, affordable supply, to really allow them to find units?
That is a very good question. I would actually ask, I don't know if Lynn Hayes is on the line. She might be able to better address that question. If not, we can certainly get back to you.
That'd be
Yes.
fine.
Good afternoon, commissioners. This is Lynn. I am on the line. Commissioner Priest, in answer to your question, yes, it is taking our customers a little bit longer than pre-pandemic to locate units. I don't know that it is due to a lack of supply. Our families have credit issues. They have difficulty getting out. And I think I stated maybe in the last meeting or the one before, we've granted many extensions to these families. 157 is a lot because we've increased the number of call-ups that we do every month to increase our utilization. So we are calling up more families monthly, again, to get to the 95 to 98%. But in answer to your question, yes, taking longer.
Yeah. Then as a follow-up to that, since you made a point that a number of the people who are having difficulties because of issues around credit and other things like that, I was just kind of wondering, like, for example, we have a fairly extensive waiting list. Is there anything that we do to those persons on the waiting list to prepare them for the experience so that we can sort of mitigate the number who aren't successful because of barriers like credit and other things like that?
I don't know, and that might be a question more for Fred than myself and what we do to the applicants on the wait list. But through our orientation process, we do brief our families on credit. And I would say most of our families are successful in searching. We have about an 80 to 85% success rate of families who are issued vouchers who successfully lease up. It has taken a bit longer during the pandemic, to be very candid.
Yeah.
Yes, this is Fred Swan, Director of Resident Services. We do offer financial literacy services, credit counseling and things to customers on the wait list. We just don't get a lot of participation.
Okay.
I have a related or tangential question, I guess. I know that, Montgomery County and maybe all of Maryland, I forget, prohibits landlords from discriminating based on source of income. Do we find that is nevertheless a problem? Or do we know, is that enforced in the county?
It is enforced.
Yes, I don't know who was speaking, but it is enforced, and we have found some incidences, seldom, but yes, sometimes landlords do say they don't accept the voucher, which is illegal.
Right.
Yeah.
Lynn, is it possible to keep a record of those that are denied? There are pro bono attorneys that are available through the Equal Rights Center and other organizations to assist these families. And they will even bring suit for enforcement. And actually, the
Absolutely.
nonprofits are more successful than the county government has been in these efforts. But
Absolutely.
nationally and particularly metropolitan wide, the statistics are terrible.
Mhm.
It's
I
only
think-
escalated.
Yeah, it's brought to our attention when our families request an extension, they're required to submit a search record. And the search record indicates really what efforts they've taken to secure a place to rent. And so if they indicate landlord does not accept voucher, that's usually how we find out. And then we would refer them to the Equal Rights Commission.
Well,
Question
I can
I have on
identify
that.
some other resources for you
Sure.
that might help.
That would be great.
Lynn, a question I have on that. I mean, obviously, there are a lot of landlords who aren't going to come out and say they don't accept vouchers. If they do, they're stupid. But are there other ways that we can track maybe repetitive landlords who turn down clients? That might be a sign. And on that subject, I don't know whether my colleagues have seen it or not, but I recall reading over the last couple of days, either in the Post or online, that New York City's just reached a settlement on this issue because they've had so many landlords, and the biggest landlord in the city who has in fact come out and not accepted vouchers, but they are going to supposedly change their practice. So I mean, it is a common problem, but I personally think that you've got enough landlords who know how to turn down potential clients without saying they don't accept vouchers. And
Sure.
it might be worth our while to try to see if there's some frequent flyers in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely. We will start tracking that. Sure.
Good.
Rick, we might also actually engage NAFA or the Equal Rights Center to do some testing here in the county for us of when it relates to families who have been turned down for any reason. We might institute a testing program, which would be helpful.
Mhm.
Well, thank you all, commissioners. Are there any other questions? I want to thank you very much, Tim, for stepping in and providing that a very thorough report.
Can I just compliment the staff? I mean, in these difficult times, that's a lot of stuff that they've been doing in terms of activities with our residents and potential residents. And frequently those things go unnoticed. Hopefully folks in the public will have a chance to read the report, but it really does reflect that HOC is doing a lot of work to try to help residents of the county.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I also should note that in our HOC newsletter, a lot of those stories are really picked up and made available to a larger public, because sometimes certainly everybody doesn't listen to our follow our commission meetings, and so or look at our briefing book. So the newsletter has done a good job of highlighting some of those successes. So keep up the good work.
I'd also like, if I may, to just compliment the staff on the adopted budget fiscal year 2022 that was just published on the website. It's a very readable budget and very informative. So thanks for the effort.
Okay, thank you all very much. And so we will move the agenda now to the Commissioners' Exchange. Are there any items that commissioners want to exchange between one another? I would note during this portion of the agenda, I think Tim talked about the explosion that occurred at the Friendly Garden development. And it's still, I was watching a story last night on one of the TV stations about a woman who has been going to the site every day, and she has started a sort of and she sings. She lived in the development, and she's got a lot of valuable recordings and tapes and other things that she has not been able to get access to in the areas fenced off. But they did a human interest story about it. I think it was last night. But I want to just note the fact that the work that the staff did in terms of working with those impacted residents and providing housing in Paddington Park for those residents. And the county executive was very appreciative of the effort that we made to work with all the other departments in the government to make sure that those families were, in fact, properly temporarily housed. So thank you, staff, for that work. Anything else in the commission exchange? Seeing nothing else, I will move the agenda to the approval of minutes. We have 4 sets of minutes to be approved. The minutes of March 2nd, 2022, closed session, as well as a regular meeting. Then on March 17th, special session and also a closed session. Can I get a motion to approve the stated minutes?
Commissioner Byrd, I move approval of the minutes as outlined for the 4 sessions in March.
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded to approve noted minutes. Are there any questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. So ordered unanimously. We'll now go into the committee reports and recommendations portion of our agenda. We will start with the report from the Administrative and Regulatory Committee that is chaired by Fran Kelleher. Fran?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have 3 items to bring before the commission today for consideration and hopefully approval. The staff has been updating both the public health plan and the Housing Choice Voucher Administrative Plan for submission to HUD. And also as part of the Housing Choice Voucher Plan, there has been work to update the Violence Against Women Act provisions to bring them into line with new guidance from HUD. And so I would like to invite the staff to brief us on those changes, and we can take questions after that.
Commissioner Kelleher, this is Elliot Rule. I'm a management and compliance analyst with HOC's compliance division. I'm going to talk a little bit today about the submission of HOC's fiscal year 2023 annual public housing agency plan to HUD. Our overall goal and objective today is to authorize the acting executive director of the Housing Opportunities Commission of Montgomery County or her designee to submit the fiscal year 2023 annual public housing agency plan to HUD. The annual PHA plan is to inform the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, residents, and the public of HOC's mission for serving the needs of low-income and very low-income families. HOC must submit a 5-year plan highlighting its housing choice voucher and public housing programs. Annually, HOC must submit updates to the 5-year PHA plan. The Quality Housing and Work Responsibility Act of 1998, or QARA, became law on October 21st, 1998. QARA, also known as the Public Housing Reform Law, created the PHA plan. This year, HOC is submitting its 23rd annual PHA plan for HOC's fiscal year 2023, which begins on July 1st, 2022, and ends on June 30th, 2023. HOC's annual PHA plan provides details about immediate operations, program participants, programs, and services. In addition, it details the agency's strategy for addressing the housing needs of Montgomery County residents. HOC submitted its fifth 5-year PHA plan for fiscal year 2020, which covers the period of fiscal year 2020 through 2024. The 5-year PHA plan describes HOC's mission as well as its long-range goals and objectives for achieving its mission over the 5 years outlined within the plan. Much of the current 5-year PHA plan focused on HOC's use of the Rental Assistance Demonstration, or RAD program, to convert the agency's public housing portfolio to project-based rental assistance and project-based vouchers. HOC must submit the fiscal year 2023 annual PHA plan to HUD 75 days prior to the start of the fiscal year covered in the plan, which is April 17th, 2022. The substantive updates to this year's annual PHA plan are updates to the Housing Choice Voucher Administrative Plan, the Housing Resources Division's Housing Choice Voucher project-based voucher activity, and the addition of 118 COVID-19 emergency housing vouchers. HRD previously adopted 26 temporary COVID-19 waivers pursuant to HUD PIH notices 2020-05, 2020-13, and 2020-33. The Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security, or CARES Act, or through the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security, or CARES Act, HUD had broad authority to waive statutes and regulations for the public housing and housing choice voucher programs. These waivers were intended to allow program participants and PHAs to participate in and operate these programs more efficiently during the COVID-19 crisis. The waivers required updates to 9 chapters within HOC's Housing Choice Voucher Administrative Plan. HUD subsequently published PIH Notice 2021-14 on May 4th, 2021, which reinstated the waivers through December 31st, 2021. In addition, HUD introduced 2 new waivers. The reinstatement of the original waivers and the adoption of the 2 additional waivers required HRD to revise the 9 Housing Choice Voucher Administrative Plan chapters. The American Rescue Plan, which President Biden signed into law on March 11, 2021, appropriated $5 billion for new and renewal emergency housing vouchers to facilitate expedited leasing for families at risk of exposure to the coronavirus. HOC was awarded 118 emergency housing vouchers based on HUD's assessment of homeless persons in Montgomery County. The emergency housing vouchers are designated for the following categories: homeless, at risk of homelessness, domestic violence victims, and recently homeless and experiencing housing instability. The addition of these emergency housing vouchers required updates to HOC's Housing Choice Voucher Administrative Plan. Staff released a draft of the fiscal year 2023 annual PHA plan to the public on February 14, 2022. In addition, staff provided the Resident Advisory Board with a copy of the fiscal year 2023 annual PHA plan for review and comment. The Resident Advisory Board has reviewed the plan and has provided a letter of endorsement, which HOC will submit as one of the supporting documents to HUD on or before April 17, 2022. To date, HOC has not received any public comments on the annual PHA plan. HOC held a virtual public hearing for the annual plan prior to today's commission meeting. The public hearing was the culmination of the 45-day public comment period for HOC's fiscal year 2023 annual PHA plan. Our issue for consideration: does the commission wish to accept staff's recommendation, which is supported by the Administrative and Regulatory Committee, to authorize the acting executive director or her designee to submit HOC's fiscal year 2023 annual PHA plan to HUD on or before April 17, 2022? The main principles are the Housing Resources Division, Property Management Division, Real Estate Development Division, and the Resident Services Division. There is no budget impact for this item. In terms of the time frame, the Administrative and Regulatory Committee informally reviewed this item at its meeting on March 21st, 2022, and supports staff's recommendation. Staff recommends it for formal commission action at today's commission meeting, April 6th, 2022. Staff recommends that the commission authorize the acting executive director or her designee to submit HOC's fiscal year 2023 annual PHA plan to HUD on or before April 17th, 2022. Before I conclude my presentation, I would just like to note a discrepancy that we recently noticed on page 1 of the template. It states that we have 8,629 vouchers total in our portfolio. That number is actually 7,659. We did have a little mix up with those stats, so we will correct that before we submit to HUD, obviously. I'll be glad to answer any questions on the submission of HOC's fiscal year 2023 annual PHA plan at this time.
Are there any questions? Can we get a motion to approve resolution 22-22?
So
I would-
moved, Linda Crowe.
Seconded, Fran Kelleher.
And probably moved and seconded to approve resolution 22-22. Interesting. But public housing 23, public housing agency plan. Are there any questions? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposers, nay. Motion is approved unanimously. Next item.
Next item is the update related to the Violence Against Women's Act. And is someone going to present that to us?
Yes, this is Elliot Rule again, Management and Compliance
you.
Analyst with HOC's Compliance Division. I'm going to discuss the proposed revisions to HOC's Violence Against Women Act policy and related revisions to the Housing Choice Voucher Administrative Plan. So our overall goal and objective here is to authorize the acting executive Director of the Housing Opportunities Commission of Montgomery County, or her designee to implement the proposed revisions to HOC's VAWA policy and related revisions to HOC's administrative plan. President Obama signed the Violence Against Women Reauthorization Act of 2013 into law on March 7, 2013. HUD subsequently released its final rule effective December 16, 2016, which expanded housing protections to victims of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking across all of HUD's key housing programs. The law initially applied to all multifamily assisted housing properties, including those with project-based Section 8. It was later broadened to include the public housing, housing choice voucher, and project-based voucher programs. HOC has extended the policy to apply to all housing programs which HOC administers. HOC updates its VAWA policy according to the guidelines set forth in the VAWA Act of 2013, as well as additional HUD guidance, specifically subsequent HUD notices, PIH Notice 2017-08 and Housing Notice 2017-05. The following is a summary of the proposed updates to HOC's current VAWA policy based on guidance from PIH Notice 2017-08, which add the low-income housing tax credit program to the list of programs covered. Tax credit is a non-HUD program and is governed by Section 42 of the Internal Revenue Code. Language requiring tenant selection plans for HOC's applicable properties to include procedures covering VAWA protections. New section outlining requests for VAWA accommodations. This section details HOC's procedures for requesting an accommodation or modification of a policy in order to exercise VAWA protections. New section, emergency transfer in the housing choice voucher and project-based voucher program. This section describes emergency transfers for both programs. In addition to the items listed above, HOC is adding clarity to the sections that address specific entities that can provide other documentation of actual or perceived domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking. These updates are to the actual policy, Appendix A, Appendix B, and Appendix C. In relation to the proposed revisions to the VAWA policy indicated above, staff are proposing revisions to Chapter 1 of the Housing Choice Voucher Administrative Plan. These revisions include the addition of a VAWA section to the existing chapter, which references the VAWA policy. The Resident Advisory Board reviewed the proposed revisions to HOC's VAWA policy and the related revisions to Chapter 1 of the Housing Choice Voucher Administrative Plan and provided a letter of endorsement. No comments were received for review from the Resident Advisory Board. The updates to the Housing Choice Voucher Administrative Plan require a 30-day public comment period, which commenced on March 4, 2022, and culminated with a public hearing held prior to today's commission meeting on April 6, 2022. To date, HOC has not received any public comments on the proposed revisions to Chapter 1 of the Housing Choice Voucher Administrative Plan. Our issue for consideration is, does the commission wish to accept staff's recommendation, which is supported by the Administrative and Regulatory Committee, to authorize the acting executive director or her designee to implement the proposed revisions to HOC's VAWA policy and related revisions to the Housing Choice Voucher Administrative Plan. The main principles are the Housing Resources Division, Property Management Division. There is no budget impact for this item. In terms of the time frame, the Administrative and Regulatory Committee informally reviewed this item in its meeting on March 21st, 2022, and supports staff's recommendation. Staff recommends it for formal commission action at today's commission meeting on April 6, 2022. Staff recommends that the commission authorize the acting executive director or her designee to implement the proposed revisions to HOC's VAWA policy and related revisions to the Housing Choice Voucher Administrative Plan. I'll be glad to answer any questions about the proposed revisions to HOC's VAWA policy and the related revisions to the Housing Choice Voucher Administrative Plan.
Are there any questions for Elliot? No, if there are none, I would move that the commission approve Resolution 22-23. Do I hear a question?
Yes. Why is this limited to women? Men are frequently or occasionally, whichever position you choose, subject to violence from others as well. And I'm wondering whether it is effective in our elderly developments who are actually frequently victimized by caregivers, family or non.
I believe
Billy
that, well,
Buttrey. I'm sorry, this is Billy Buttrey, Compliance Oversight Manager for our Compliance Division. Yes, it does cover anyone outside of that. The definition for VAWA, that was the original intent, was Violence Against Women's Act. but they opened it up to cover men, women, elderly. So your definition has increased beyond just women.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Commissioner Byrd, I second the motion. I know we had a motion on the floor.
It's been properly moved and seconded to approve Resolution 22-23 related to the Violence Against Women's Act. Are there any further questions? Seeing none, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The resolution is approved unanimously. Next action.
Our third item on the agenda is the update to the Housing Choice Voucher Administrative Plan, which, as you have heard, incorporates in some changes from the previous two items. And Elliot, are you going to provide that again? Or is Jesse going to talk to us about that?
Jesse Joseph is going to present on that item.
Okay, great. Then I'd like to introduce to the commission Jesse Joseph to talk to us about the complete administrative plan and its updates.
Thank you, Commissioner Keller. The Code of Federal Regulation requires public housing agencies to adopt written plans and policies that describes the federal regulations and establish local policies for administration of the voucher program for that PHA. For the Housing Choice Voucher Program, this governing document is the administrative plan. CFR also requires that PHA revises their administrative plan as needed in order to comply with federal requirements. Optional changes unique to that specific PHA may also be added, provided it doesn't conflict with federal regulations. At this time, HOC has developed proposed various revisions to its administrative plans. The updates to the Housing Choice Voucher Administrative Plan required a 30-day public comment period. The public comment period commenced March 4th and culminated with a virtual public hearing meeting today, April 6th. The Administrative and Regulatory Committee reviewed these items at its meeting on March 21st, 2022, and supports staff's request for authorization to implement. I'm sorry, you moved too fast, Aries. I apologize. The Administrative and Regulatory Committee reviewed these items at its meeting on March 21st and supports staff's request for authorization to implement the proposed updates to the Housing Choice Voucher Administrative Plan. Since the Administrative Regulatory Committee's approval, staff has updated language which explained what types of remote virtual inspection would be conducted, trigger events that would result in an RVI reverting to an in-person physical inspection, and omitted CMAP language in Chapter 10 of the plan. Let me scroll down. Thank you. Our overall goal and objective is to request that the Housing Opportunity Commission in Montgomery County adopt the revisions to the Housing Choice to HOC's administrative plans, table of content, Chapter 2, 10, and 11, governing the Housing Choice Voucher Program, and authorize the acting executive director or her designee to implement the revisions to the administrative plan for the Housing Choice Voucher Program. As policies and provisions change at the federal, state, and local levels, HOC revises its administrative plan for the Housing Choice Voucher Program. Accordingly, these revisions ensure that HOC's voucher program remains in compliance with the regulatory governing its jurisdiction in Montgomery County. Below is a summary of the proposed updates to HOC's administrative plan. Could you scroll up, please? Thank you. The table of content, Chapter 1, modified letter N and insert letter O and P. Chapter 10, modified letter E, F, G, H, and I to accommodate the insertion of remote video inspections. Chapter 2, eligibility for admission. Staff are proposing revisions to Chapter 2 of the Housing Choice Voucher Administrative Plan to update its eligibility and admission standards for a living aid. Can you scroll up, please? Thank you. Chapter 10, Housing Quality Standards and Inspection. The CARE Act of 2020 provided the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development with broad authority to waive statutes and regulations for the Housing Choice Voucher Program. HUD published PIH Notice 2021-31 on December 31st, 2021. This notice extended the waiver previously adopted in PIH Notice 2020-13, published July 2nd, 2021. The notice incorporates the use of virtual remote video inspection, or RVI, as an alternate HQS inspection method. Adopting this waiver provides HOC with the flexibility to continue to serve our most vulnerable customers while reducing the risk of exposure to the current coronavirus from third-party inspectors and HOC staff. Staff also reviews this implementation as essential to HOC's business continuity plan in the event of another pandemic, epidemic, or major natural disaster. Chapter 11, Owner's Rent, Rent Reasonableness and Payment Standards. In pursuant of PIH Notice 99-35, HUD merged Section 8 certificates and voucher programs. This change allowed for a new way to calculate the housing assistance payment and the family share. The merger has since concluded, making all pre-merger language obsolete. As a result, HOC has made the following revisions to the plan. Omitted in its entirety the sections alluding to pre-merger language, adjusted and clarified the payment standards to include the electric funds transfer process. As part of the process for making revisions to the HOC Housing Choice Voucher Administrative Plan, public comment was required. Accordingly, HOC provided a 30-day public comment period, which began March 4th and concluded today, April 6th, with a public hearing. During the comment period, a draft of the proposed revisions to the Housing Choice Voucher Administrative Plan was made available on the agency's website. Staff has presented the proposed revisions and table of content, Chapter 2, 10, and 11 of the Housing Choice Administrative Plan to the Resident Advisory Board and received a letter of endorsement. Staff has addressed any comments from RAB prior to approval by the Commission. Our issues for consideration. Does the Housing Opportunity Commission in Montgomery County wish to accept staff's recommendation, which is supported by the Administrative and Regulatory Committee, to adopt the revisions of the HOC Administrative Plan's Table of Content, Chapter 2, 10, and 11, governing the Housing Choice Voucher Program, and authorize the acting executive director or her designee to implement the revisions to the administrative plan for the Housing Choice Voucher Program? Scroll up, please. Thank you. The principles that are going to be affected the Housing Opportunity Commissions. There are no budget impacts, and the time frame is yielding a result today, April 6th, by the commissions. And the staff's recommendation and commission action needed. Staff recommends that the Housing Opportunity Commission in Montgomery County adopts the revision to the Housing Choice Administrative Plans, Table of Content, Chapter 2, 10, and 11, which governs the Housing Choice Voucher Program, and authorize acting executive director or her designee to implement the revisions to the administrative plan of the Housing Choice Voucher Program. This concludes my presentation. We're ready for any questions, if any. You're welcome.
Are there any questions for Jessie? If not, I would like to compliment the staff on one, to me, new thing from our public hearings. The notices were publicized not only in English in the Washington Post, but in Spanish in Washington Hispanic magazine or newsletter. And I think that it's good that we are beginning to take seriously the multiplicity of cultures and languages that we serve by putting our public notices in Spanish in publications that reach that particular population as well. So thank you all for that. And with no other questions, I would move that we approve Resolution 22-24 to approve the Housing Choice Voucher Administrative Plan for submission to HUD.
I second that.
It has been properly moved and seconded to approve Resolution 22-24. Are there any further questions? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposers, nay. The resolution is approved unanimously. Thank you very much from the Administration and Regulatory Committee. We will now move on to our Development and Finance Committee that's chaired by Jackie Simon.
Good afternoon. The first item on our agenda is the Hillendale Gateway approval of a preliminary development plan for the non-age restricted building and approval of the revised affordability mix for the age restricted building. And I would ask the staff to speak for the benefit of the public to the development highlights and the way you are presenting them in this particular development, because I think there are several new perspectives that we are adding to not only our development, but its benefit for our residents and the neighborhood, and particularly the issues of digital equity and resiliency, I think are things that are particularly noteworthy here. Catherine, are you going to be presenting this?
Yes, I will.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Simon. Good afternoon, Commissioners. For the record, my name is Catherine Hollister. I'm a Senior Financial Analyst in the Real Estate Division. Staff is seeking the Commission's approval of a preliminary development plan for the non-age restricted building, as well as approval of a revised affordability mix for the age restricted building at Hillendale Gateway. On page 165 of your brief book is the executive summary. Hillendale Gateway will be a new mixed-use, mixed-income, multi-generational community located on the site of Holly Hall Apartments. It will comprise 2 residential buildings, one, a 155-unit net zero energy, age-restricted senior building, which we refer to as the AR building, and the other, a 308-unit passive house, non-age restricted multifamily building, which we refer to as the NAR building. In addition to the residential buildings, the site will have a drive-through coffee shop, parking garage, retail spaces, and green space. Last month, the Commission approved a preliminary development plan for the AR building and selected a general contractor and construction manager for the development. Today, staff is requesting that the Commission accept staff's recommendation, which is supported by the Development and Finance Committee, to 1, approve a preliminary development plan for the NAR building, which includes restricting 93 units to households earning 30, 40, 50, and 80% AMI, and financing the restricted units as a LIHTC transaction utilizing the income average set aside. And 2, approve a revised affordability mix for the AR building, which would provide a broader range of affordability levels. Approval of these items would provide a full spectrum of affordability at Hillendale Gateway, not only site-wide, but in the AR and NAR buildings individually. On page 166 of your brief book discusses the development highlights that Commissioner Simon was alluding to. Hillendale Gateway is a hallmark development that incorporates a number of agency, county, and state priorities, many of which are listed here. There are some additional development highlights that are included in this development that aren't highlighted here necessarily. One of them being inclusive design and accessibility. I would refer to the presentation that was presented to the Commission last Commission cycle for a really sort of in-depth analysis of those features. Page 167 provides the proposed affordability mix for Hillendale Gateway, both across the site and within each residential building. It's the next slide. We go down one more slide. There we go. The affordability breakdown can be found in the table to the right. Not only does this proposed affordability mix exceed site plan and financing requirements, it also provides a full spectrum of affordability at Hillendale Gateway. Page 168 presents the preliminary development plan for the NAR building. Staff proposes financing the affordable portion of the NAR building. So in the next slide, thanks. Staff proposes financing the affordable portion of the NAR building as a LIHTC transaction. Given the range of affordability, staff recommends utilizing the income averaging set aside. It is important to note that this financing structure will require additional volume cap from the state. The likelihood of receiving additional volume cap has become a real possibility in recent months due to the efforts of HOC staff and leadership. Without additional volume cap, LIHTC financing would not be possible. As a result, the transaction would require approximately $7.5 million in additional equity or other permanent financing sources to achieve the depth and breadth of affordability proposed. Staff also proposes financing the construction of the NIR building with a conventional construction loan and housing production funds, and permanently financing the development with an FHA risk share mortgage. The next slide provides additional information on the proposed sources and uses. And the following slide presents the development timeline. Staff will return to the Commission later this year for approval of a final development plan and final financing plan for both the AR and NAR buildings. Finally, on the next slide, you will find the summary and recommendations for this item. On the next slide after this one. Yep. Thank you for your time. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
I don't have any questions, but I just want to, again, as we did in the committee meeting, thank the staff for reworking this proposal and adding, the additional affordability and especially the depth of that affordability. I think it's greatly appreciated, and I think it's a really strong improvement to the overall project.
Can we get a, Jackie, are you going to move a motion?
Well, I would like first to comment on the staff's addition of the issue of resiliency and how this building can provide a hub, not only for the development, but for neighbors, for emergency heating and cooling capability, power plugs to charge cell phones and computer batteries, and durable medical equipment. For a person to be able to charge a power wheelchair is a life-saving, as well as other medical equipment can be life-saving. And whether a person is a resident or a guest, to have access in a power outage to a resource, I think is incredible. And I think it's also very important that the county government and MoCalNet are working with us to expand the digital equity. And every time that we make one of these improvements to our inventory of housing, we are providing potentially life-saving issues as well as comfort and equity issues that are immeasurable. And I just am grateful to the staff for the creativity. The thoughts of a heating and cooling center is just phenomenal. And you keep coming up with things that make life safer and life extending. And I think it's remarkable. And I thank you very much. And if there are no other questions, I would move approval of the revised plan and also add my appreciation for the financial breadth that you have brought to this development, which is very important. So, thank you.
You have a second?
Second.
It's been probably moved and seconded to approve resolution 22-25 related to the Hillendale Gateway project. Are there any further questions? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposers, nay. The motion is carried unanimously. Next item.
The next item is at Garnick Apartments, and staff is seeking authorization to execute a construction and development services agreement. And I'm not sure who's Zachary or Marcus is going to be presenting this.
Commissioner, it'll be myself, Marcus Irvin, Director of Development. All right, good evening, Commissioners. Here to present Garnkirk Apartments authorization to execute a construction and development services agreement between HOC at Garnkirk Farms and RJD Real Estate Advisors for the development of Garnkirk Farms Apartments in Clarksburg. Next slide, please, or 2 slides down. So recall that the story of this development was originally introduced as a proposed 184 unit community as an unsolicited development opportunity from the Duffys as part of a letter of intent received back in December of 2020, which was subsequently approved in March 2021. And as the multifamily development represents a limited opportunity in the Clarksburg area within a larger master plan community surrounded by various amenities, schooling, and highway transportation. On the strength of the Duffy's relationship with HOC, including Hillendale Gateway and Wheaton Gateway, Duffy approached staff to gauge HOC's interest in taking over the development and owning the improvements. And with that, there will come a number of restricted affordable units, deeper level of affordability. Additionally, development would be enhanced with close attention and investigation into sustainable development practices and accessibility features via universal design, which you've just previously heard as part of the Hillendale Gateway plan, along with Wheaton Gateway as well. Commission formally closed on the 99-year ground lease on September 17th of 2021 and subsequently approved a pre-development plan in November at the November meeting of the commission for approximately $5.3 million, using the PNC RELOC as the funding source. Execution of the ground lease permitted HOC and RJD, the Duffy affiliate, to enter into a pre-development services agreement to allow RJD to continue providing vertical design management and consulting services. Here today, to advance the future development and construction oversight efforts, staff is seeking authorization and approval to enter into this construction and development services agreement with RJD with terms similar to what's presented in this packet. If we can go to the next slide. Highlight here, design is still in the sort of concept / schematic stage. So on the right-hand side, you see what we would call a typical Texas donut style development, which has the apartments wrapped around a structured parking garage, which would provide access on each level of the building. In the lower right-hand corner of that plan, you'll see sort of the block diagram for all the community amenity spaces, which are still in development. And once again, as a highlight, this multifamily component is the final phase of development, which would deliver high quality mixed income housing in Clarksburg. Next slide, please. Also as noted, just to dovetail on the discussion about the letter of intent, Duffy would lease the ground to HOC and also act as lead developer on the project through permitting, construction, and lease up. This structure provided numerous benefits, including removing the land costs, providing HOC 100% of the improvements, activates a development deal with a trusted partner, and frees up HOC's real estate development team's bandwidth, and also adds a development deal with refined pre-development spending needs. Lastly, on the bottom portion, we just highlight the ground lease terms that Duffy would be afforded to, also receiving a right of first offer to perform development and construction management services for that development. HOC would also receive a purchase option at the end of the lease, and also HOC also holds a right of first refusal should Duffy ever sell the land. So this is just in case you ever need to refer back to those terms. Next slide. This just highlights the overall master plan. Once again, we've got retail with the Clarksburg outlets to the west. We'll see the larger master plan, which consists of single families, towns, and now the multifamily effort that we're working on, and as well as Clarksburg High School just south of the site. Next slide. This slide really highlights what Catherine had spoke about from a Hillendale Gateway standpoint. So I think with every new development, there's a lessons learned. So we've broken out here some of those principles, including design, sustainability, and universal design that the team will continue to refine and work on for this development. From an architectural standpoint, very classic current look that would fit in with the Clarksburg, the larger Clarksburg community. Sustainability, we'll look at things such as resiliency, lead metrics, also Energy Star indoor air quality standards. And then also at the leading edge of sustainability, it's conceived that this would be a fully electric net zero development. So we're making a push to shift away from gas. There is no gas plan for this project. So we'll look at also ways of incorporating solar into the project. And then last but not least, but equally important, accessibility and universal design. We're exploring numerous ways to implement that from the building entrance through community areas and into the residential units. Some of those features that we've discussed in the past that we're looking at would include large door widths and large hallways, also blocking in the walls for grab bars and seats, and also rollable surfaces. We do show some exterior decks, so we've taken some notes and ways to incorporate accessibility and safety features with that as well. Next slide. Once again, this is a common theme of just ensuring that our future developments and ones like this also are in alignment with Montgomery County's 2050 goals, Thrive Montgomery 2050. Highlighted in green are just some of those things where this development definitely hits those hallmarks. Next slide. In a very condensed format, just some of the featured amenities that we're looking at from the in-unit perspective, community-wide. We highlighted here just based on the discussion from the Development and Finance Committee, incorporation of induction ranges. So that is part of what we're looking into with this being a fully electric building. So that feasibility is being actively looked into, as well as incorporation of 3-bedroom units, which was a lesson learned from Westside Shady Grove. So we are looking at expanding opportunities for families for mixed income housing, and that is sustainable as well. Next slide. This graphic here really just illustrates the construction and development services. The way we have designed this, essentially, Duffy would be providing construction development services through, call it, 3 buckets of development. Pre-development, which commenced pretty much at the execution of the ground lease through what we would call Q3 of 2023. During that stage, if you could scroll down just a little bit more, we've highlighted across all 3 stages of pre-development and development sort of Duffy's role and how HOC would be working alongside with them. Won't go through in full detail, but essentially they would be assisting the owner in establishing the project budget, managing all the day-to-day aspects, reviewing the budget, consulting with the owner on a lot of those deep design details such as sustainability, universal design, and so forth. HOC would be riding adjacent with them, along with project oversight, accounting, payment to vendors, and so forth. When we get into the construction stage, which we're estimating approximately 20 months, RJD, once again, as development advisor, is monitoring the general contractor's progress, conducting site visits, coordinating inspections with utility companies and so forth, with HOC also monitoring those things as well. And then when we get to the post-construction and lease up, there is a warranty period where the developer is assisting us with compilation of technical manuals as part of that turnover to the management company, while HOC is also developing the leasing protocols and working with the future property manager. For this effort, we've outlined a 80-20 split, which is commensurate with the level of service that they are providing. Right now, we are just holding an estimate, as we will need to come back for a future final development plan and financing plan. But this, we think, very succinctly highlights sort of the developer's role and how HOC will be supporting them in that effort. Next slide. Lastly, just a recap of just timing and milestones. Calendar year 2021, we had at least 2 to 3 visits with the commission on establishing the ground lease, having the pre-development funding approved. Most of what will occur in 2022 will be ongoing building design, various procurements for general contractors, third-party testing, and so forth that we've seen in our other projects. And going through 2023 and beyond would be potentially some early starts, but for the precast garage, building permit approval, and then also the construction start, which once again, we're holding about a 20-month window for now. The next slide just recaps prior commission approvals, of which we've had 3, and this will be the 4th. And then last for the summary and recommendations. Staff recommends that the commission approve execution of a construction development services agreement between HOC at Garnkirk Farms and RJD for the development of Garnkirk Farms apartments in Clarksburg, which is supported by the Development and Finance Committee. So I'll take any questions if you have any.
There are no questions. I'd like to move resolution 2226.
I'll second.
It has been probably moved and seconded to approve resolution 22-26 related to Garnkirk Farms. Are there any further questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those is nay. So ordered. Thank you very much. We've now finished the business from the Development and Finance Committee, and we will move into the next portion of our agenda, dealing with our items requiring deliberation and or other actions. The first item is our fiscal year 23 recommended budget. That will be done by.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Commissioner Priest. I will introduce it and then throw it to Terry Fowler. So the FY23 recommended budget reflects the agency's continued commitment to provide innovative, energy-efficient housing, increased geographical access for families to important resources, and superior services to our customers. Through innovative financing and development tactics, HOC's model for affordable housing development will allow us to continue on the path of integrating neighborhoods and bringing families closer to critical resources and quality neighborhoods. To this end, the FY23 recommended budget reflects ongoing investment in personnel and systems to successfully manage and maintain HOC's properties while integrating the new business model of a hybrid remote work environment developed in response to the pandemic. In addition to the agency's focus on developing, managing, and maintaining our real estate portfolio, we continue to deliver superior services, much like the ones we talked about earlier today, to our customers that have adapted to the current changing environment. These services are provided through various programs, including those offered through the HOC Academy. So I would like to introduce Terry Fowler, the HOC's budget officer, and just thank Terry and her entire team for assembling this. This was a heavy lift, but she did an excellent job, and I just wanted to thank her and her team. Terry, you are up.
Thank you, Tim. Good evening, commissioners. For the record, my name is Terry Fowler, and I am the budget officer at HOC. As Tim mentioned, I will provide a few highlights from the acting executive director's FY23 recommended budget. On page 192 of your packet, you will see that the FY23 recommended budget being presented today includes a $306.9 million operating budget and a $252.9 million capital budget. The budget is balanced with a planned draw from the general fund operating reserve of approximately $1.3 million, primarily due to the anticipated continuation of COVID-19 on rental income and operating expenses. On page 204 of your packet, you will see that grants make up approximately 44.41% or $136.3 million of the operating income of the agency. The majority of this amount is the housing assistance payment subsidy received by HUD, which is projected at $109.1 million for FY23. And this is for the voucher payments to the landlords. That makes up approximately 36.58%. I'd also like to note that county funding accounts for another $12 million or 3.91% of our budget. Another 33.28% or $102.1 million is the revenue generated by our properties. The balance of the operating income is made up of management fees and other small miscellaneous income. Non-operating income makes up the balance of 12.59% of our budget. Moving to the expense side on page 205, the composition is about 73.15% or $224.5 million for operational expenses. Again, HAP makes up the majority of that expense. And the current budget does include a draw from the net restricted assets in the voucher program. This is largely due to the timing of the rebenchmarking from HUD that usually does not happen until later in the year. And I do anticipate there will be changes between the recommended and adopted due to that. The non-operating expenses are comprised primarily of the debt service payments and reserve contributions that are required, as well as various transfers between our funds, restrictions of property cash, and the development corporation fees that are expensed at the property for the cash provided to the agency. On page 207 of your packet, you can see the reflection of the breakout of our income between restricted and unrestricted revenue. Of our $306.9 million in revenue, only approximately $27.7 million, or just over 9%, is available for discretionary spending. The restrictions are either grant or bond requirements, debt service or RFR contributions, or internal restrictions to cover the costs of operating and maintaining our properties. On page 208 of the packet, you'll see the capital budget for FY23 is $252.9 million. This is comprised of $6.5 million for improvements to our offices, our information technology infrastructure, and our properties, as well as $246.4 million for 12 capital development projects that have activity during fiscal 23. The charts on pages 209 and 210 show the distribution of the sources and uses for the capital budget. Unlike the operating budget, which does not change much in distribution from year to year, the capital budget can fluctuate greatly depending on the nature of the development deals. I do want to note that the chart on page 209, which distributes the sources in the capital budget, includes, there are repayments on bridge loans in our capital budget, but the chart does not include that net amount because it is negative. So the total on the chart would adds up to more than the $252.9 million. We do anticipate repayments to both the OHRF and the line of credit bridge loans in fiscal 23. As mentioned earlier, we will be going through the budget in detail with the BF&A committee over the next 2 months. During these discussions, we will provide updates for any revisions that occur before we bring the FY23 proposed budget to you for adoption in June. To assist you in your process of review, we will be making available a fiscal 23 recommended budget book in the form of a PDF document to the commission and senior staff tomorrow. This book will also be published both on the HOC intranet and website. This is the first time a recommended budget book has been produced since fiscal 2013, and we want to thank all the staff that contributed to this accomplishment. We look forward to addressing your questions at the upcoming BF&A meetings. This concludes the presentation.
Terry, on behalf of the commission, I want to thank you for this initial look at our operating and capital budgets. We know that there will be extensive discussion through our Budget, Finance, and Audit Committee. This information and certainly the preparation of the budget book is really something to be applauded. So I want to thank you for that, and we look forward to this next 2 months getting us through to June when we can look at an adopted budget and a recommendation from our Budget, Finance, and Audit Committee. Are there any other comments the commissioners want to make? Rick Nelson?
Yes. As you've indicated, the Budget, Finance, and Audit Committee will be going over this for the next couple of months. I would urge two things for my fellow commissioners. One, carefully go through the narrative that supports this particular recommendation that came to us today. It is a very complete document that indicates the length and breadth of activities of HOC. We'll be going through all these in some detail and utilizing the workbook and the material that you see over the next couple of months. Please raise any questions during that time so that we can have those discussions at the BFNA meeting if they are issues of concern to you. And I want to thank the staff for a fine job.
Thank you.
If there are no other questions at this time, I know that there will be a number of those that get raised during the course of this conversation. So I am not at all concerned about the level of input that will come from commissioners as we move through this process. Vic, do you have something else you want to add to that?
No.
Okay. All right. Thank you. With that, thank you very much, Terry, and thank your staff for all the work that's been done. And we look forward to having a final document presented to us in our June meeting.
Thank you.
The next item for consideration is requires a resolution 22-27, which is approval to increase the acting executive director's approval limit to fund a transfer of knowledge agreement to provide transitional and consulting services to HOC. Who's going to discuss this?
I will, sir. A little over a year ago, on February 1st, 2021, HOC engaged the service of the former CFO to respond to its immediate need for consulting services for risk management for the full year, while HOC recruited for a permanent staff. Since that time, a number of unpredictable events, which began with the resignation of the executive director, have caused the engagement of the consultant to be extended. Case in point, in November 2021, the CFO resigned and an acting CFO was appointed from among the executive staff. The consultant was again called upon to assist with providing institutional support for the finance office and to the new director of risk management, as well as to provide general support to HOC caused by the resignation of the prior executive director. Staff recommends that the commission approve an increase to the approval limit of the acting executive director by $75,000 to provide full funding for the transfer of knowledge agreement with the consultant through the end of calendar year 2022. There will be no budget impact in FY22. The impact will be in FY23. Again, the aggregate value of the contract is $325,000. Does the commission wish to accept staff's recommendation to increase the acting executive director's approval limit by $75,000 to provide full funding for the consultant's transfer of knowledge agreement with HOC for transitional and consulting services?
This is, I'm assuming this action is relative to increasing the limit is for this one-time transaction. This is not approving across the board the increase of the authority to the executive director.
That is accurate, sir.
Are there questions?
Well, there's a comment. I would support this action, and we'll make a motion to do so. But I just want to repeat, and consistent with the comment you just made, that this is unusual and is not anticipated to set any precedent, but it is directly the result of a series of unexpected occurrences and vacancies that we had. And this, the former CFO had the ability to fill in for those vacancies. And particularly this year, one of the things that will happen, we've got an audit that is just about to begin, and we don't have a permanent CFO in place. We have a acting CFO, and it would be helpful for us and for the acting CFO if we can have somebody with the institutional knowledge to work with the auditors. So I think that's a primary motivator in terms of this, in addition to the work that we have to do in terms of negotiating our contract. So I think it's an important task, and the contract, you will also notice, is multi-year, meaning that it's not just for this year in terms of the total amount, but it incorporates, pardon me, the amounts that we have expended over the course of the last year. So in that regard, I would move resolution 22-27.
Is there a second? And then I'll take a question from the commissioners. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Is that you, Jackie?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes.
Probably moving seconded. Question, Fran?
Yes, I just want to be sure. I know that the state legislature had reduced the level of authority that the executive director had without coming to the commission. I want to make sure that we are not going to run afoul of that. And second, is there a reason why we're doing this by increasing the executive director's authority versus us approving a contract increase? Normally, a contract would come to us for approval, and if there were changes, it would we would approve any increases to that contract. So it just strikes me as different, the approach that's being used here, and it might be fine, but I just wanted to get clarification on those two issues.
Asha, could you speak to the first concern?
I am not aware of the state legislature issue that you're speaking about.
It was from a couple of years ago.
I think if I'm not mistaken, if I can just interrupt, I believe the reason it's being handled this way, if I'm not mistaken, this was originally a contract that did not come to the commission because it was within the limits that the executive director had to sign a contract. And therefore, to extend that contract, which was signed by her and not formally approved by the commission, they wanted to extend that existing contract. But because of the requirements we have in terms of the limitations on signing authority, they had to come to, in fact, in this instance, give the acting executive director the authority to exceed that amount, which is tantamount to the commission approving the contract. But it relates to the fact that the contract was originally executed by the acting executive director and not submitted to the commission for approval, consistent with our procurement policy.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I appreciate that clarification.
Are there any other questions? I'm going to approve this request for a motion, but I just want to make a note the fact that I am doing this as a one-time exception because I do not support the practice of entering into contract with former employees to bring them back as consultants. I just do not agree with that practice, and but I'm going to approve this as a one-time exception. Are there any other questions? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Any other? Motion is carried. Pursuant to Section 3-305B and D of the General Provisions Article of the Annotated Code of Maryland, I move to adopt the closing statement dated April 6, 2022, and to adjourn this open session to a closed session to discuss the potential acquisition of real estate property located in Silver Spring for redevelopment into multifamily housing. This topic must be discussed in closed session in order to protect HOC's ability to bargain and purchase the property. The statutory section that allows this meeting to be closed is Section 3-305B3. If any member of the public wishes to object to the closed meeting, please comment in the YouTube chat box or contact HOC's General Counsel. Instructions can be found in the State of Emergency Open Meeting Procedures, which is posted on HOC's website. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
It's been probably moved and seconded. Are there any questions? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion is carried unanimously. Thank you all very much, and this meeting is now closed. And we are adjourned.
Can't I leave?